Welcome to the fourth of our Green Participatory Budgeting Organisers webinars. These are informal chats with people with experience of participatory budgeting, and we're going to focus on green participatory budgeting during today's session, which will last up to an hour or so. So I'm really pleased to welcome two really knowledgeable and insightful people, and also a bit fun. I've seen some of Oliver Escobar's presentations, and he's always up for a joke, so maybe we'll have a few of those. So I'd like to introduce Oliver Escobar from the University of Edinburgh, and also with us today, all the way from Porto Alegre in Brazil, the home of participatory budgeting, is Tarson Nunez, who's from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. So I'd say that Oliver has been really central to the development of participatory budgeting in Scotland, certainly on a sort of policy framework, helping to keep politicians on track and talk about the opportunities of this. I think we've worked together 10 years or now. And Tarson is basically, as I would say, an advocate for participatory processes with over 20 years' experience in social movements, and he's also a board member of the International People Powered Network. And as I said before, you're living in Porto Alegre, the home of Brazil, and I can see you've got your matcha tea with you there. Is that right? So I might be vaping occasionally during this webinar. So Oliver, green participatory budgeting, just some initial thoughts about that.
Thanks, Jess, and it was really good to see you, some familiar faces, and also people I haven't met, so really glad to be here. Of course, now I feel the pressure to be funny, which once one of my friends who's a comedian told me the secret to be funny is not to try to be funny. But anyway, so I guess I have three things I want to say as a kind of a starting point, and then let's see where the group wants to take the conversation. It always looks greener on the other side, and although people tell us that we have been doing well in Scotland, we look to other places and we like more what we see there. But it's true that in Scotland there has been a lot of development, especially since 2010, and people like Jess have been instrumental in bringing the learning from down south and helping us to create momentum behind PB and to build capacity and so on. But I have been worried about the PB agenda in general, because although it keeps advancing in some places, there are others where it's really beginning to show the glass ceiling, how far we're going to reach before we enter a period of more fundamental transformation. And Green PB, I think, has been really important in terms of bringing new energy and new ideas to the field. And we now see Green PB all over the world. There are really interesting cases in Austria, in South Korea, in Kenya, in Poland, in France, in Spain, Portugal, Scotland as well. I think one of the things that I'm keen to hopefully get into this conversation, especially knowing that a few people in this group are not just very close to practice, but also to strategizing to advance the field in terms of policy and broader sort of activism, is to kind of realize that because PB has a almost 40 years of history, there are some really important lessons for the field of democratic innovation more broadly, lessons that we are learning often the hard way in terms of the extent to which our governance systems are prepared to evolve in order to become more participatory. But to me, participatory forms of democracy, which is the kind of democracy to which processes like PB contribute, is a natural ally for climate action. I think probably that's not going to be controversial here, but essentially the kind of top-down governance that has brought us the climate crisis is not going to get us out of it, right? So for me, the key is the strategic agenda for the next 10 years. And as part of that agenda, yes, we need to keep evolving Green PB processes, making them better, ensuring their quality and integrity. But I think we need to pay just as much attention to questions of activism and governance and the reform of our public administrations. That's going to be essential to the long-term vision for Green PB. And so the last point, I mean, without that, it's going to be really difficult to really advance in terms of expansion and scale. And this presents us with some really difficult choices because there are some places where elected representatives get a little bit more involved in the PB process, but we've tended to keep them at arm's length. But for Green PB to really scale, to really get into really large, substantial, fundamental budgets and try to address some structural issues, we are going to have to experiment with more hybrids. Where yes, citizens need to be at the driving seat, but elected members need to come into the picture to try and help us to get beyond, the kind of box in which PB sometimes is put, which doesn't really have the potential to alter systems more fundamentally. So I think that this is going to be some real challenge, and I'm happy to talk later a bit more about what's happening in Scotland and the northeast. There is a large PB agenda, a green PB agenda attached to the transition fund, which is a £500 million agenda, of which only a tiny fraction so far, 3.5 million, have been allocated through PB. So that's what I mean by the glass ceiling. We're beginning to realize how far we can get with some of our current thinking, and we're beginning to learn how we need to strategize if we are serious about making Green PB a more transformative movement.
Well, some really insightful opening thoughts there to draw us, and also some challenges. Tarson, give us your perspective on the potential of Green PB, particularly within the South or within your own context.
Yeah, well, the first thing I'd like to share with you is that beginning where Oliver was talking about scaling up processes, we here in Brazil fortunately have a huge experience on participatory processes, and nowadays we have in the federal government a huge participatory infrastructure based on presential and internet based processes. So now we are discussing, started in the beginnings of this year, a national climate plan coordinated by the Ministry of Environment that is doing like based on a national conference with presential participation of civil society organizations and social movements, and using Decidim platform to upscale the participation. So since March of this year, we have a process combining presential plenaries in like 8-9 states of Brazil until now, where people can participate directly, presentially, and a Decidim platform that collects ideas and make votes to build plans. So this is not like PB because you are discussing plans, but not attached to the budget. But it's a very interesting process that allows lots of people to participate. Here in my state, we are doing this through the state assembly, which is the parliament, the state parliament, which decided to use all the 2025, the year of 2025, to do a process to discuss a plan for sustainable growth. The idea is how to recover the economy by doing a greener economy. So like combining nature preservation and economic growth, and trying to build a plan to direct the economy on this direction. Just one important difference between our experiments and all the climate assemblies that are being all over the world is that while climate assemblies mostly rely on mini publics of random selected citizens, like a sample of the people of one city or one state or one country. We normally don't use this methodology. We prefer that all the presential processes are doing by open assemblies that are based on everyone can access. So like in our state, we have done a very important process combining presential and internet participation through a platform, Decidim platform as well. Everybody can try to see it. If you type Brasil Participativo.gov.br, you can see all these platforms where all these processes are located. But we did a process where we made like 5 big thematic debates, like 9 regional seminars in all the regions of the state. We live in a state with 10 million people. We did it in all the regions of the city with a presential participation. And we also did build this platform where every citizen can present proposals and vote and support proposals. So we try to combine presential participation with open assemblies, and in this process we managed to have like 5,500 participations presentially, like the numbers, 593 civil society organizations, like 29 environmentalists, 59 cooperatives and solidarity economies, and 166 NGOs, and 36 universities. So we try to make a combination of presential and internet participation, and try to build a network between the universities that are very important on this discussion of climate change and climate crisis, because we have to face all the negationisms and all the interest groups. So we use this process to build a network between policymakers and policy managers and the universities, and try to use the process to raise awareness to Rio Grande do Sul society about climate issues, and raise the support for green policies measures from outside into the parliament, like opening space to listen to the people, what people want, what are the people proposals, and try to build a program that the parliamentarians can use as an example to build up public policies. The weak part, and I think it's always important to underline the weak parts, and like Oliver said, it's always good to show the weaknesses of the processes, is that all this discussion of big plans, national plan, statewide plan, is not directly connected to the budget. So you decide, you elaborate proposals, you have a huge public support for the proposals, but the connection between this bunch of ideas that we gather in a plan and the budget is not clear. So you don't have automatically process to turn the proposals into policies, because there are 2 different paths of discussing. The budget is discussed only with the deputies, the parliamentaries, and the plan is discussed with the population. So our greater challenge now is how to turn all these proposals. We have, like in our state processes, like more than 200 proposals, very qualified, very interesting, lots of smart people, lots of scientists were involved. But we are now ending up to build this plan, but it is not clear how to turn this plan into action, because we don't have connection with the budget. So this is very important. You have to have the political will, and you have to convince the policymakers to not only listen to what the public is demanding, but also to transform it into policies.
There's loads of detail in there, and we're going to have to unpick some of that. So what we've got is that big scale we've got a big global challenge. There's going to be millions and millions and billions of pounds being spent on this. We're only 5 years away from 2030 now. And every year that we don't make that massive transformation, we know that we're going to have to spend more, we're going to have deeper impacts, and the people who are going to suffer most from that delay in change are, as always, the poor, who are least responsible for that. So we've got some really big challenges, also about how PB has evolved in Brazil and moved away from direct budget conversations to a kind of more what I would call Western, let's have a big debate about it and then somebody else makes that decision. So in all of that, given that we're all small people, I'm just interested in both of yours responses, and I'll go to Oliver first, perhaps about the importance of small scale PB and citizen action in the face of these massive challenges, and should we give up trying, or what is the point of small scale PBs in a local place trying to do with a global picture? So over to you, Oliver, to see if you can respond to that.
Yeah, no, we should absolutely not give it up. To me, that is the foundation. This is, you know, so it's been well documented how important it is to have locally rooted processes where you build civic skills, community solidarity, new ways of creating public space and interfaces with the local administration and with other public institutions. So that shouldn't be given up. And I would contest the notion that this is a small. It's only small if you look at a single process in isolation, but there are thousands of small PB processes, and increasingly, probably we are already in the hundreds when it comes to Green PB, although we don't have yet a proper study of the field because it's been quite emerging, and as ever, practice is ahead of research, so we're trying to catch up. So we shouldn't give it up. That is the foundation. That's where you build the capacity. That's the anchor for the movement. But we need to work at both ends, because if we only work at the grassroots level, our experience, not just with PB, but with other democratic innovations, is that very quickly you reach the glass ceiling. And by the glass ceiling, what I mean is the limits of our existing administrations, the limits of our existing political culture, the very limited space within current political leadership to think about the future with some clarity. And to act now with a view to long-term challenges. So we need both ends. We need the strategic work, the scaling up, the ambitious, broader democratic innovation agenda, and we need the locally rooted, grassroots mobilized capacity building space of Green PB. And these things are not. I appreciate Tarson's point about the importance of popular assemblies, which I think they are really important. In the UK, they remain very important in the Extinction Rebellion space, in a lot of the things that organizations like Citizens UK do, and many locally initiated popular assemblies. Those are important. I think climate assemblies, though, based on as Tarson called them, the basic principles of mini publics, they are also really important because they have the potential to provide an interface with the state. So I think these things don't work. They need to work together. I made this point many times, and it's one of my great frustrations that climate assemblies don't look enough towards other democratic innovations like PB. And that is a problem, because what PB offers that climate assemblies cannot do is that PB mobilizes a lot of energy, ideas, capacity to act across communities, whereas climate assemblies cannot do that, and they tend just targeting the state, public authorities or governments as the channels for implementation, whereas you could couple climate assemblies with PB and with other commons-based ways of working, and then you're beginning to build a new way of governing, a new form of democracy. So we need to join the dots between all those things. But the locally rooted PB is and remains the foundation, and is a school of democracy. This is where, no one starts in this field. Well, I guess there are some people who do, but most people start at the grassroots, and that is the real school, and where you really get the solid values that then carry you through to other levels of governance and other lines of work.
And Tarson, I mean, obviously Brazil has got this long history of sort of popular participation, the landless movements coming out of the dictatorship and the birth of PB at that point and all that. So what's your view about how we solve global challenges at the local level and the importance of maintaining that link?
Yeah, first of all, I totally agree with Oliver on the importance of local processes, because these are processes that are more deeply rooted in society. Because many times we have a lot of experiments on participation based on CSOs and social movements, but these movements and especially these organizations, NGOs and associations, not necessarily are, at least that on our experience now, many of them are, after 20, 30 years, are bureaucratized, and they don't really represent grassroots anymore, especially NGOs that tend to professionalize and depend on donors. So sometimes you have a representation of civil society that not necessarily have a real base. So this is a challenge. And when you do a local process, you allow people to participate directly. You have the NGOs as well, you have all the unions and so on. But anyway, a local process always gives space for non-organized citizens and make pressure on these organizations to have a real constituency, because you can have representation of your union in a ministry or on a statewide process, but you don't necessarily consulted your constituency, and you are like reproducing representative democracy mechanisms instead of allowing direct participation. So I think that always local processes are they give more density to the process. The other thing is that even when we don't have this connection to the money sources, you don't have connection to the budget. In the case of discussion of the climate crisis, I think that there's one important aspect that we have to have in mind, that institutional and political change happens when society pressures from below and from outside in the state. So even though you don't have the resources to decide on that, building this discussion in society, you raise awareness, you build pressure from outside in the space. So this like even though your proposals are not necessarily able to be transformed in real actions, you are raising awareness, you are bringing conscience, and you are allowing the citizens to feel part of the process, and this this builds pressure on the political system. So even though you don't have results on your process, you are raising awareness, and you are putting the climate crisis on the political agenda. And this is very important, even though you don't have concrete results on your processes. But the other thing I think is very important, because we lived here this a lot, is that this discussion about climate change and climate crisis is always you have always this danger of the greenwashing processes. You have lots of big companies, and everybody is pro-environment today, at least in Brazil. You have places like the US, when the president says the climate crisis is a scam, but here in Brazil, everybody agrees. So, but some people really agree, and other people agree like, oh, I'm green, I like paint my the site of my business in green, and so I'm pro-environment. So in the case of discussion of the climate crisis, you have to be very careful with this kind of double standards and this kind of discussions, that is always everybody is pro-nature, but not necessarily everybody agreed to do real things.
So I think we've really started to unpick an issue around power here, and about how power captures its space and then wants to hold on to its space. And so on one level, PB is really great as a way of sort of enabling citizens to learn about the limits of their power, but also different strategies for challenging power. But we do have an issue that most people who have got power want to hold on to it. So I'm just trying to open up any reflections on that issue about how PB is transformative around issues around power and also around empowerment. So how can it help citizens actually respond to the climate crisis, and what does that mean? And in a sense, is PB just a disruptive technology to try and kind of shake up the status quo, or is it a kind of an end state that we can get to? So a few thoughts around that. Anything you'd like to say on that, Oliver, for a start?
Yeah, I was actually making a note because I thought you were going to open it up, but I'll take my last chance before before we open it up, because this is the fundamental question, right? And it connects to points that Tarson was making, and to there's also a really good question by Angela in the chat that I want to come back to. But this question of power, the thing is, Tarson, one thing that friends here in this room can tell you about what's happening in the UK just now is how quickly you can begin to see the public discourse shift. So now there is a big, the net zero agenda, the sort of climate action agenda in the UK is being pulled into the culture wars stuff that has been imported with a lot of investment by dark money coming into the UK and importing a lot of this from the US, and that political strategy of basically culture warring everything that matters, right? And it doesn't take very long for big powers to shift. I mean, look how long it took for Facebook and Apple and Microsoft to shift their green agenda and to sit down with the powers that be in the presidential inauguration. As soon as they saw that AI was going to be an absolute climate killer, it took very little for these really powerful, rich kind of overlords of the digital world to give up on their green agendas, right? We might or might not want to come, but this is just to say that we cannot take it for granted that public discourse stays there. But the important thing here, though, about power and PV is this is a conversation we had very early on with some officials in the Scottish government when the transition fund was being worked up a few years ago. And this is a classic conversation with politicians that I've had over the years, because politicians do tend to have a zero-sum understanding of power. If I share power, I lose power, right? That's the sort of very simplistic way in which a lot of power holders think. But actually, there is an understanding of power that is more generative. Sometimes by sharing power, you create power that wasn't there before. So, and I'll give you an example. In the northeast of Scotland, where we have this Green PB agenda emerging, the traditional model to allocate some of those millions that have been allocated through PB would be just to have a committee of some kind behind closed doors and through some kind of process allocate, it'll be 10 or 12 people in a room, and that's how the funds will be allocated. Now, compare that to what Green PB has done. Every year it has inspired, in the end, around between 40 and 60 projects have been funded, but many more have been proposed. And behind each of those projects, there are new community groups or existing community groups that have created new alliances, mobilizing a lot of resources, local capacity, local imagination, local ideas that a committee behind closed doors could not have done. So Green PB has mobilized power, local power for climate action that cannot be mobilized top down. That's a way in which the politicians who enable this have generated power that wasn't there before. It's not that they have given up any power that they have. So we need to, when we make the case for these things, we need to realize that power can generate, sharing power can generate power. It's not just, a zero-sum game in which you lose power. And just if I may, just super briefly on Angela's question, which is, again, very relevant for the UK, Tarson, where we have a kind of we have our own version of the new populist right that we see in many countries, and here is called Reform. It's a political party that at the moment is expected to do very well in the next election, although that's very far away and things can still change. But Angela is asking a very important question, which is, if we call it Green PB, that might actually stop it on its tracks, right? So should we just go with PB in general as a process? And I think this is really important. This is, for example, why in Budapest, the Climate Assembly of Budapest didn't call itself a climate assembly, because they just couldn't do that in Hungary, right? This is also, but the important thing here, though, is there have been many places where Green PB has happened without intending to be Green PB. The city of Paris, there have been years where over 40% of all the funding has gone to environmental action on transport, energy, air pollution, and so on. So I think we are going to have to be really wise about this. Otherwise, we're going to fall in the trap that we learned very soon in Spain. Spain was one of the early adopters in the early 2000s. And PB was seen as a program of a particular government rather than a new institution that belongs to everyone. So PB needs to be built with cross-party, cross-ideological support as a new institution through which all kinds of things can be channeled. Otherwise, it will struggle to be sustainable for the long term. So I think you're onto something really important there, Angela. If naming it as Green PB gets in the way of embedding it and giving it a chance of developing and taking root, then we can do away with the green. Because you know what? When people are given the chance, guess where the money is going to go? Everyone wants clean air, and everyone wants affordable transport, and people want, energy efficiency and bringing down costs. These are not ideological, these are fundamental economic issues that the majority of the population will get on board with.
So Tarson, have you got any responses to that and the issues around power? You mentioned greenwashing, and off you go.
No, I totally agree with Oliver again. I think that beginning with the end of his part, I think that on one side, the green approach helps us to bridge with other kind of publics that otherwise would be alienated from the processes. When we have had PB here, lots of middle-class people don't attend. Lots of business people are outside of the process, because PB in Brazil is normally something associated with popular movements and neighbors associations and things like that. And the green approach, I think that widens the public, because everybody now is very connected to this kind of thing, especially here when we just lived a huge tragedy like the last year. But relating to the sharing of power, I think that we had a good example of how PB or how sharing power through PB empowers you. When the Workers' Party was elected in 1989 in Porto Alegre, we only had like 36% of the votes, and we only have like 4 council or 3 council members on an assembly of like 35. But through PB, we managed to have power enough, because we shared the power with community, and then we have the opposition, a majority of the opposition on the local assembly, on the city assembly. We managed to pass the budget, because after the proposal, we have lots of people that had voted for these proposals. So even the opposition had to rely on respect the PB processes. So sharing power really boosts your power, augments your power. And the other things on this dimension of participatory processes as empowerment tools, we have, in the case of Brazil, it's very important because our democracy is very recent. Real democracy, like vote for everyone, started in 1985 in Brazil. Prior to that, those who were illiterate could not vote, for example. So we have a very recent democracy, and we have a very authoritarian and hierarchical political culture. The participatory process on PB helped us to show the people that on one side, the public managers are servants to the people, not the bosses. We used to elect people, say, oh, you tell us what to do. After PB, everybody understood that the guy who was elected is your employee. We elected him to work for us. And then you level the power, and it's very important to see, like on the first assemblies, the way the people behave was very respectful, and oh, Mr. Mayor, and things like that. After some years, people realized that they were equal to the mayor, and people felt authorized to like confront the authorities and say, no, I am a citizen, we decided it, you have to do what we said. So it changed the way people see the government. Like a government is a tool for the citizens and not something who is above the citizenship. And other very important thing is that through participation in general, not only PB, people learn skills that empower them. People learn the importance of organization. People learn to speak in public. People learn how to organize. And this experience, as Carol Pateman assessed, like in the 80s, participation is a learning process. And this learning process empowers you towards the state. You learn how things work, who is in charge of what are your rights, what are the duties of the government. So participation helps the citizens to know better and reassess the relationship between the citizen and the state. So it's very empowering in many different ways.
I'm going to change the kind of level of the conversation. I'm going to open up in a moment, but first off, you're both academics. You spend a lot of time in your heads thinking through reading stuff, looking at journals. I'd just be interested for each of you to just give us a little story about when you felt involved in PB and also emotionally moved. So when it touched your heart. So is there a time when you were involved in this that you actually felt moved on more than a cerebral level? And I'm going to open up to either of you to answer that one, because it's quite a change in flavor.
I don't know, maybe Oliver can start.
I'll keep it short. For me, it was my first ever kind of hands-on being involved as a well. First, I should question the premise here, which is that I spent a lot of time in my head thinking, yeah, I have a 2-year-old toddler, right? I have a 2-year-old toddler who's very dynamic, and she really takes pretty much 99% of the neurons that I have left in my brain. And then there's a 1% that I dedicate to these academic pursuits. So, but my moment was 2010, 2011 must have been when I live in Edinburgh. So Edinburgh was one of the first places to adopt PB in Scotland. Sadly, it never, although sadly with a footnote, I'll come back to this quickly. Sadly, that process never really grew into all the potential that we saw. And this was something that back then was called Leith Decides, although now I think it's called Leith Chooses. So this is in the area of Leith, and I was a local. But back then I was studying these things as well. So I got to be involved in this sort of monitoring of the voting process, like external sort of observer of integrity or something like that. And I just remember vividly the stories that many here in this group will have heard of people who have never taken part in a public forum, didn't even know that they could actually talk to their neighbors and that there was a community spirit locally. They had no clue of the things that people were trying to make in order to make a difference in their communities. And, it's those stories that move you. It's the human side of democratic life that we don't get to see in the official version of democratic politics that we get sold day in and day out, right? So it's that human side of things that gives you hope. And just the footnote, Leave the side, so Leave Chooses never really grew to become a fuller process. But the City of Edinburgh Council now, many, many years later, finally is beginning to take PB a bit more seriously, and we are having conversations about using PB to allocate the money that is going to be raised through the tourism levy. So that's happening. It's going to be happening very soon. So I'm excited about that. But Edinburgh has been a laggard. Everywhere else in Scotland has done better than us.
Tarson, the moment where your heart was shifted.
Yeah, well, first of all, I started my academic reflection about PB many, many years, like 25 years after I started to doing it, because my first experiences with PB was as a public manager in the City Hall of Porto Alegre, where I started to do it, like learning by doing, and only many years after that I came back to do my master's and my doctorate around PB. So the reflection started after like 20 years of practice. And in the case of Brazil, PB started as part of the democratic struggle against dictatorship. We were struggling against the military. We wanted to have all the democratic freedoms and the liberties associated to democracy, but at the same time we wanted elections, we wanted to free organization of parties and all this free speech and so on. We noticed that elections wasn't the only part of democracy that matters. Participation was very important. And as we came from our grassroots movements, we were always very interested, not on this representative dimension of democracy, but in organization, in grassroots, in building power from below. And I think, and I still think until today, that real change always comes from outside into the state and from the bottom up. This is real change. We never can expect that to have enlightened leadership that, we'll build. Democracy is only built on for me, democracy is much more related to personal actions, like interpersonal relationship, than to power structures. Elections is only a part of democracy. Democracy is a mindset, is a way to build things together. And we were very influenced at that time by theology of liberation and Paulo Freire's thoughts. So this was what touched me. And when we started, it's something that few people know. But when Olívio Dutra ran for mayor, we didn't have participatory budget on our program. It wasn't there. Our view of participation was slightly different. But the important thing is that we listened to what people was demanding. The neighbors associations wanted to discuss the public budget, and we had this wisdom of, let's listen to what the people is demanding. And that's why PB emerged. We learned by doing this. So I wasn't touched by PB, but we brought this democratic grassroots perspective from the movements. And from the movements, it emerged as a public policy, not as something that was priorly thought and elaborated theoretically. We started to elaborate theoretically many years after we are already doing. This is very, very Brazilian. We start doing things and then we think, oh, what we done? Was So it's a very Brazilian approach. So we started to doing because we were fighting for democracy, and in every side, in every aspect of the political life, and every side of personal life. Like this was one very important feature of our students' movements and democratic movement in Brazil. We really wanted to do to connect the political institutional dimensions of democracy to the personal dimensions of your democracy on your ordinary life.
Thank you. I'll share mine. It's very simple. I met an old lady who presented at a PB grant making event. She got £10,000. I met her a few years later, and I said, "Do you remember that time when you went into that public hall and there were all these people around and you put your idea forward and everyone voted?" And she said, "Yes, it was terrifying but magnificent." And I thought, that's what democracy should be about. It should be a process that forces us to move, but actually involves us and makes us feel that we've made change happen. So I'm going to hopefully de-spotlight the three of us, and bring in some of the other people.
Hi, everyone. It's a question about methodology. So we've heard about PB, we've heard about citizens' assemblies, we're also hearing about legislative theatres and how they can all be combined. And that makes sense to me in terms of agenda setting, then deliberating, then implementing. So I was wondering if there were any case studies where that's been done in that way, any pros and cons from your experience, from anywhere in the world.
Who wants to pick that up? Combining different approaches.
I can offer a quick. So the case that I've come across recently is actually in Brazil. Claire, you must have come across this, where they are using legislative theatre as part of a climate assembly. So I think there's a really interesting case there to learn from, and I'll be surprised if this is not linked to the Libera Brazil. I don't know. They used to be the only ones doing this stuff, but I might be wrong. But yeah, so that's the case I know. Now, in terms of linking PB and assemblies or mini publics more generally, there have been some cases. I mean, I remember a pioneer was in Australia. I can't remember. Canada Bay. I can't remember the name. I could dig it up, but that was ages ago, and essentially was kind of like a small mini public that had some kind of budgeting sort of capacity to allocate budgets. And then in Scotland, it has been used up north. I think Aberdeenshire has done a number of citizens' juries on budgets, and they were limited. They wanted to also then have a broader community engagement process feeding into the jury and informing but that didn't quite happen. So there have been sort of pilots and early trials, but I think that not enough to know how we are going to do it. I think that now we are at the stage where these things are going to happen more, and where we are realizing that all these different democratic innovations have different strengths and weaknesses, and now is the role of designers and strategic thinkers to pull these things together. Because as we know, assemblies do need to strengthen their capacity for impact, and that cannot be just looking at government. It has to have other channels, again, into the commons, and I know you do a lot of work in the commons-based space, but yeah, I think that this is the job for the next 10 years, is how we create these hybrids, these broader architectures of democratic governance that join the dots of all the things we've learned across these different processes. And again, that's not going to be straightforward, and there's massive questions about the window of opportunity and the limits of our political leadership just now, because they are completely distracted from this, and they are pretty much like it feels like a Titanic generation. The iceberg is coming fast and thick. We know everything we need to know, yet we're not shifting direction. So part of the big job is to create the space for this to advance. Is going to be to cut through the leadership blocks.
And Tarson, you talked about that big process in Brazil, that where you're trying to unite technology, platforms, different forms of assemblies, but no PB involved in it. Anything?
Yeah, we have a very complex situation in this aspect here in Brazil, because in my case, I'm very in favor of combining methodologies, and part of my experiences in people powered is learning that there are many other instruments in terms of participatory processes that we can use, especially new methodologies. But in the case of Brazil, we are not, we are somehow like victims of success, because PB was very successful in the way it was done in Porto Alegre in the 90s and in the beginning of this century. And this created like a kind of a myth that people don't want to change anything, because this is the right way to do it. So we cannot do anything different. So in the case of especially the big part of Workers' Party leadership that deals with participatory budget in Brazil are very resistant to change it, even though it's not written on the wall that it must be like that. But as no, PB must be done as Porto Alegre did it back in the 90s, and you cannot change anything of that. So we are on a real struggle to try to open the minds of this more orthodox part of our leadership, say, well, there are other instruments of participation that you can use. PB is not the only way, and PB, like was done in Porto Alegre, is not the only way to do it. So, and we are very slowly managing to implement new methodologies, like this combination between presential participation on popular assemblies and the internet. Now we are using that, but it was a huge struggle to convince people that no, internet is not a problem, we can use it. We know all the problems that we have, like digital participation is not the same thing as being in an assembly, but it has some important aspects that you go way beyond our public the assembly if you put it on the internet. So, but it was really a struggle to convince people that you can diversify the methodologies of participation, because people were very almost personally attached with the model.
That's the power, isn't it? You become connected to that and that ownership of that is your power base, isn't it, again?
Yeah, but we are slowly changing it. And this experiment that Oliver, it was a city like in the Northeast or in the north of Brazil, they used climate assembly and legislative theater at the same time, but it's very rare. It's like one case or another only. It's difficult to convince people, even progressive people that wants to build democracy sometimes are very attached with orthodox ways of doing things.
Angela, you had your hand raised earlier.
Yeah, I think I'm interested in the idea of size, especially with Tarson talking about use of the internet for participation, which, I mean, obviously I think it would be ridiculous not to. But my interest in the whole aspect of participation, you know, coming from, as Jez, you know, I do, from an ethics and democratic theory perspective, I'm interested in it as the beginning point is the growth of citizens from being just passive consumers that we've become, and, you know, focusing on citizen well-being through growth, through participation. And so the issue of size becomes relevant there as well, because, you know, I think there is a sort of ideal numbers for small group participation and decision making. Is it fair to say that it's, I mean, is it good that you have just direct democracy, or should there first be circles of real world participation, and delegates are the ones that then go online?
Anybody give you a chance to collect your thoughts on that one? What's the right scale for human interaction with democracy?
Yeah, I think that somehow two different things. On one side, I really agree with that small groups and presential interactions are very important. This is where you build power. But I think that's the dimension of scale gives us other aspects that is important to rely on. Because, okay, I always think that presential interaction is way more important, because that's where you build confidence, where you build empathy, where you build collective ties that are substantial for democracy. But on the other side, maybe internet participations have important aspects that we must rely on. On one side, you get the dimension of scale. Okay, it's not the same quality of participation by being in a meeting, looking in the eyes of the people, feeling this collective sense of unity. But when you put things on the internet, you can access to much more people. So people who, for any reason or another, couldn't be in the presential processes, and anyway, we'll have the information, we'll have access to this discussion, we'll have access to the materials, could make their own propositions and things like that. So you can access much more people. You can strengthen the legitimacy of the processes, because in the case of our process here in the state, we have like 5,000 people presentially participating. But on the website, we have like 24,000 people participating. So it gives us much more legitimacy. Okay, not only the 5,000, it's five times more participation. So it gives us like a more legitimacy in society, because it's not only 5,000, much more people. So internet helps us by scaling up participation. But there's one other important aspect that we learned in this recent process. That's deliberation is not the only important aspects of participation. Deliberation is only the final part of participation. So in our website, we did not only have a space to people to make proposals, support proposals, and vote proposals, but we also had a part of information. So people on the website could access what was being discussed on the many seminars. You have videos of the seminars, you have documents, you have all the steps that we are doing were public in a transparent way to everyone to access. So you don't only, there's a good proposal, I vote on it, but people could see everything what was happening, and this is a learning process. And other important aspect that we learn on this process, that we also realize that participation is not only about deliberation, but about a quality process of discussion. So at the same time, people could enter the platform and make proposals. We have lots of documents and videos and interviews and case studies that people can access and have formation, this formative dimension, capacity building. People could learn, and when they go to the proposals, they go with much more information, because they can have access to information, to discussion, to experts, to scientists. So this dimension, democracy is not only about the results, the outcomes. Democracy is also about the process. And you have a quality process with good information, especially in this discussion about the environment. We'll have all this negationism and all many kinds of manipulative aspects. So we had on our website not only a space for presenting and voting proposals, but we have also good quality information to help people to decide with quality information.
We've reached our hour, so I know some people are having to go. I just wanted to have well, besides thanking both Oliver and Tarson for a really wonderful and rich conversation, which I know could go on for a very long time if we let it. One last thought from you, Oliver, about PB and the green agenda, and one last thought from Tarson, and then we will close and wrap up. And if you have to go now, anybody, that's fine. And thank you for being with us. Oliver, last thought or reflection?
Yeah, so I want just a super quick reaction on the digital side. I think we just need to get beyond the binary. We now understand the things that digital does well and the things it doesn't. So it's about how we combine it. And, you know, there's a strong case for digital infrastructure to improve inclusion. I mean, in Scotland, for example, in the Highlands and Islands, you know, if we don't have digital infrastructure, a lot of people get excluded from PB and all kinds of other things. So we just need to find the right combinations, and there's a lot of work in this space. So it's definitely the future, and there is no right scale. Some issues will have to be done at local level, both digitally and in person. Some things at the regional, national, and transnational level. So it's going to depend on the issues and the challenges we're taking on. We do need a digital infrastructure for all of that. On the future of Green PB, in many ways, I mean, this is a relatively new agenda. So I just hope that we learn the lessons of previous phases of the expansion of PB, and we apply them, and that we realize that it does have to be built in the way we build institutions, with permanence in mind. I think there are risks that Tarson was mentioning, right? That it can crowd out other things, but unless we give it institutional space and it becomes part of the way we govern, then it's going to be really difficult to scale it up to the level where it needs to be. So, but just now is the early phase, and I just want to urge patience. One of the things I start to see is a lot of rush, around democratic innovations. If they are not changing everything immediately, we're ready for the next thing, and that is a problem. If we fall for the logic of fashion, that's not how you build a democracy. So we just need to keep doing the work, keep building from both ends, from the grassroots and then at the strategic level, and just not let ourselves be disheartened by how massive the task is. Because the good news is that there are lots of people, just as many as there are out there pushing very dark movements and forces. There are just as many people mounting the counter movements, and around you where that's happening. But there is a global kind of movement around democratic innovation that doesn't get visibility, but it is there. And many people here and around the world are working to make it more visible so it can expand our political imagination. So yeah, let's just keep the work going.
Let's expand our political imagination. I like that. Tarson, last thought from yourself.
Yeah. I think that I agree with Oliver, but on this idea that we must keep building democracy. And my last word is that we know that in the whole world now, democracy is a threat. We have like the rise of the populist, right-wing, fascist everywhere. And the way we can help to save democracy in the world is to show people that democracy is not only elections, it's not only governments, democracy is not only this liberal democratic system that people don't believe in. And if we are not able to show people that democracy is something way deeper and way different than this electoral system, democracy will be more and more. People won't defend democracy because they don't like this political system as well. So we have to show and build different experiments that where people can experiment democracy practices and learn that democracy is way more than simply electing someone from each 4 years.
Thank you, everybody. Great conversation. I'm really sorry we couldn't continue it for much longer. I'll stay on, but can I say thank you, and anybody who's made to stay with us, can we have a little round of applause?
Thanks, everybody.
And Oliver.
Really
Thank
great.
you very much.